Dear colleagues, welcome back from the coffee break. Although it wasn't really a coffee break, it was more of an ice cream break. I hope you're wide awake anyway. My name is Axel Schaffmeister. I'm the regional EACD coordinator for Switzerland, and it's my pleasure to announce the next speaker, Anna Adi. Anna Adi is professor of public relations and corporate communications at Quadriga University of Applied Sciences in Berlin. And she's going to talk about storytelling and more specifically about heroes in storytelling. So storytelling itself is certainly nothing new. We as human beings have been telling stories to each other ever since, from the very beginning, even before we could read and write. Our brains are kind of made for stories. We remember stories well, whereas memorizing facts is not so easy for us. So whereas storytelling itself is very old, it has only recently moved up on top of the agenda of corporate communications. We as communicators are no longer supposed to simply issue a press release, but tell a story. Yet the public, in times of alternative facts and post-truths, is increasingly critical of stories. Don't tell us those stories, those made-up stories, but give us the facts. So how do we deal with that? So Anna, we're curious to learn about your ideas and insights on how to create appealing narratives and how to apply the storytelling approach successfully in communications. Please welcome Professor Anna Adi.
Thank you. So I think Axel put it really, really well. There are two assumptions we're working with, that communicators are good storytellers, native storytellers, good luck to you. That might be if you have that talent, or it might be if you worked for it. But if you happen to be like other storytellers that I've met, who were scientists at their core and became storytellers later, it doesn't really feel that natural after all. And we work also under the assumption that we all understand what storytelling is, which is not truly the case. One of the other things is that it's so interesting when you talk to people about storytelling, that storytelling is appealing as an action, as a noun. But if someone comes to you and says, let me tell you a story, you'll either think, oh, it's either in for gossip, or it's such a liar. So how do we tackle that between storytelling as an appealing activity and let me tell you a story, me coming from an NGO, a corporation, a big money-making endeavor, or an organization that seeks to make money? How do we make that appealing? So I call this hero-centered storytelling, but I think we'll zoom in and out into the topic a little more, because we have an hour and a bunch of videos to watch in between, just to make sure you really don't fall asleep. And the reason why I also asked you very kindly to come forward is because I'm told this is really cold down there, so you can all cuddle up in case it's necessary. Or live truly the topic of this year's Congress, and that is collaboration. So you'll find ways to warm up. So why do we look at storytelling? Well, we started with this story, right? That stories shape how people make sense of the world. Now, if you have ever studied media studies, you'd say, well, that's stereotypes, thank you very much. And that is the images in our heads are different from the world. But still, let's focus on this. Stories shape how people make sense of the world. And in a sense, Axel said it already, numbers might be facts, numbers, figures, might be more complicated to remember. And part of the work of the communicator is to be memorable. Correct me if I'm wrong, but probably every second, if not every, document, strategic document that you issue has something about raise awareness of this and that. And that raise awareness of this and that is basically telling a story that people can remember. And your measurement is the remembering. Now, power of storytelling, if you look at what these guys from Eco Stories are saying, oh, wonderful, you can't read, I can't read. Basically, it looks at two things that I wanted to show you from the slides. One is that the hero story is one of the most common used plots in Hollywood. And my argument to you would be, if Hollywood does it, why couldn't organizations do it? But the other thing is that whenever we mention words that are very important, different parts of our brain would react. And, you know, emotion, stories, memories are linked with one another. So it's a different part of the brain, all in all, that you want to bring. Now, if you were to get advice from Edelman, I hope nobody works with them in the room, they would say that storytelling is about putting a face on the topic. It's about using graphics to reach employees in multiple languages. It's about verbally explaining complex or technical concepts. I wonder why it's just verbally. Why can't you do a tap dance to explain technical concepts? Why can't you gesticulate? Just saying. Consider gamification and leverage content. I guess it's clear that I disagree. This is a gross reduction of what storytelling is, not to mention that it loses all the beauty of what storytelling actually stands for. So let's make it clear. Storytelling is not branding. Branding is what you want to achieve. Storytelling is your way to it. Storytelling is also not sales. It might get you there, thank you very much, which is something that some of us might want to achieve, but is not storytelling. Let me tell you a story about my product isn't necessarily sales. Infographics or websites with pretty pictures is not storytelling either. And I'm telling you that, imagine me wearing a hat of the chair of the Digital Communication Awards that we run in Berlin. And we have this storytelling section, and every third application brings a pretty website with picture that has a seamlessly usability through it. And I kind of think, what am I missing? I'll tell you later what I'm missing. It's not customer contact, it's not wearable tech, and it's not virtual reality. So whoever comes to you and tells you this is storytelling, tell them that Anna Adi said so, that is no. And I'm willing to have a fight with them. But storytelling is narrative. It's, again, the memory. So narrative comes into words, a mixture of feelings, of emotion. It can be tactile, but is narrative. And it's, to a degree, a means to an end, right? As Axel said, if we were pickers and growers, it was at the times when we used to tell the warning signs and the memorable signs, how we transmitted information to one another, how we raised the alarm bells, and how we taught our future generations how to survive. So, storytelling is narrative. Now, corporate storytelling, I'm an academic. I need to bring academic research in. In a sense, I'm trying to revenge my colleagues who are usually told that if they're academics, they do stuff that has never anything to do with practitioners. And yeah, there's this idea that academics live in an ivory tower. Not all of us do, I do. So corporate storytelling as a PR strategy has been shown repeatedly to show significant benefits for employee engagement. And in this case, the idea is that it could result in internal and external reputation through making employees of the organization's reputation champions. I've been earlier, Phil is not here, I think. I've been at a presentation earlier from one of our colleagues And Phil Brunswick was saying exactly the same thing, that some of the research that they've carried out with practitioners indicated that the coherence, in a sense, of a brand had the greatest impact on talent. So remember that. Storytelling is that way. Also, when we think of storytelling and leadership, then we're expecting different things. And that is to build trust, demonstrate empathy, especially if you think of virtual teams. A leader must find creative and emotive ways, so the emphasis here is on emotion, through effective communications, to inspire others. Let me take a deep breath. How many of you work with virtual teams? And how many of you feel inspired by your leaders? Oh, that's wonderful. Way better than I thought. That's great. So one of the studies, this is my time to plug my stuff in, and I promise I won't come back to it. One of the studies we ran out, we as in Camelia Crișan, who works in Romania, and I, we looked at corporate social volunteering and storytelling as a tool to capture those stories and memories. And we've run this as a training into how narrative works. We send the people to write their stories and their scripts, and we reviewed them with them if they wanted to. And then we had a debriefing interview when we asked them both about the digital story they created, but also the process. So the results will make sense in this context. So for the participants in our stories, who were from all over the world and have been involved in various volunteering programs that have been facilitated by the organizations that we're working for. So that means either they were given the time to do it, or there was an infrastructure in place so that they could go and either donate their expertise, time, or do something else for someone else at the company's expense and time. These people, reflecting on their stories, found it as a wonderful opportunity to revisit that experience. I hope you agree that when we're in it, things feel different than when we think about them. So reflection enabled them, particularly as a first-person narrative, as we were looking for, something that they had to find a couple of pictures, a couple of images, not too many. We wanted a 30 seconds to 3 minutes video that would capture the thing that affected them the most, that meant to them the most in this volunteering program. They found it very refreshing. Now, it can be emancipatory, which is a tough word in English, but that is what we found from some of the people in our discussions with them, is that they've discovered new talents, that they've discovered new passions. And that is very, very important for an organization to facilitate. That's also a great responsibility for an organization to carry out, because once someone discovers a talent and that is uncatered for, there's a risk of losing them. I'll come back to that. It's also about a team and personal transformation. People who have been involved in projects with teams, but also have tried to do this storytelling exercise as teams, they found out that they fused better. They had things to talk about more than they thought before. They're productive and instrumental, so again, we talked about career development. They can be therapeutic. It was not our study that showed that, but there are other studies carried out, particularly in healthcare and high-stress environments, that find storytelling, employee storytelling projects as being therapeutic and as reducing burnout, as reducing stress, and as reducing the effects of emotional labor. It's something for you to consider. So even if it's not your department, if you work in such an organization, consider it as a tool. And finally, for us, what was very, very interesting, because as I said, we worked with people who aren't in communication departments, but rather have volunteered. Having gone through a digital literacy program and project like ours, enabled them to improve their digital literacy and digital confidence. And that's very important. If you think that digital has been a buzzword and a trend for a long time, and yet we struggle not only within communication departments, but also outside with digital transformation, having a project of digital storytelling it's a good pretext to revisit digital skills that will be at the core of your extended activity. So that's for the people. For the organizations, one of the first things that we've identified, and as I said very quickly, is that these storytelling, digital storytelling activities enabled the identification of new talent, of new career paths. And I can't disclose the name of the organizations where our participants work, but one organization in particular was extremely good at capturing this feedback that came out from the volunteering experiences and offering further career path opportunities or development within the organization. So it's not enough to tell the story, but you need to act upon it. And so we found over and over by speaking with some of the people from this organization that this increased their likelihood of staying rather than leaving. They were more loyal to the company. They were becoming advocates both internally and externally, supporting these volunteering programs, but also speaking a lot more positively on behalf of the organization. So I think this is what you want to achieve. You want to achieve ambassadors, employees that can harness, that can multiply, they can speak positively and confidently about your organization. So if you don't believe me and my study, there's some others here. There's a literature review of somebody looking at all the other studies that were done, in particular with internal communications. But I wanted to bring your attention to the second line where it says that story objectives remain the same even when the content is adapted by the narrator to make stories more personal to staff. Remember this, because one of the things I'll tell at the end when we speak who the heroes should be, that's a point that I want to make. So, how do we do storytelling? If you're really into infographics, and you'll say, well, wait a minute, you said storytelling is no infographic. But if you're curious about it, James Harris has created a periodic table of storytelling, which basically captures the kind of plots, the kind of characters, the kind of mischief that you can introduce in a story. So if you really have nothing else to do this afternoon, you and I can go through all these, because each of those little boxes you can click on and you can read on, and you can play with them and see what sort of plot and story you can develop. So this is the scientific method where you can see if they work with one another. Of course, there are others. At the core, a story has four things. It needs to have a message, a plot, it needs to have conflict, and characters. And I remember reading a book recently, and it said, if you think of Sunday in Paradise, that's wonderful, but that's boring. That's no story. There's no conflict. Nobody will be interested in Sunday in Paradise because it's all quaint and quiet. For a story to be memorable, to intrigue, it needs conflict. And this conflict can be introduced between characters, between situations, at various times during that expose. Though what's very, very important is not to find the characters, though hero-centered storytelling looks at characters. But what's very important for an organization that embarks on a storytelling journey is to find the message. So here's the thing. Let's do this. I really like it. It's not mine. I wish it was. Let's do the obituary test. Have you done it before? Okay. We have plenty of time. So what I'd like you to do, I'll look on the clock. We'll take a minute only. Pick one of those questions. Think that your company that you're working for is going to disappear from the market tomorrow. So you'll have no job. Ooh, terrible. And choose one of the questions. Either what will your customers say about the company, either what you or your colleagues will say about the company now that it died, very sad, or what would your competitors say? So, clock is ticking, 1 minute, think about it, then I'll stop it and you'll have to turn to your left and tell the story to the person next to you. So if Chatham House is not going to be here, what are you going to say about it? Or if HSBC weren't to be here tomorrow, what would your clients say about it? 30 seconds left. Ooh, and we're done. So turn to the person at your right and tell them that one thing you would say about your company if it were to disappear from the market. Okay? I'll come down here, I'm not sure. You might have to speak in my headset. So. Oh, there we are, we found it. Allow me to pick a victim. Allow me to pick a victim. Right, we'll stop here. So, answer your question. So let's see, Ildiko, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Ildiko, what would you say about, which question did you choose?
I would say even customers. Yeah.
Okay. So what would the customers say about your company?
So
if it
my
would
company
disappear
is
tomorrow?
Continental, and of course we are producing lots of things. We are an automotive supplier, and we are also producing tires.
I don't
and now
need
I
the background.
specifically
Sorry to
thought
interrupt.
about tires.
What would they say if you would disappear? I don't need the background.
Today,
Yeah.
cars learned to fly. Therefore, Continental moved from tires to producing wings. But but we have been a path opener, and we have done a big change for humanity. Winners on soles made of continental rubber, and cars like Renault on continental wheels. They have changed the way and made, yeah.
Okay, great. Right, let's choose one more, because I'm aware of time, and I'm sorry about that. May I come to you, if you don't mind? So if your organization, I'm sorry, I'll buy you a drink.
Me?
Yeah, Ruth. If your organization...
my name, that's
absolutely.
Okay.
So don't tell who you're working for. Tell us if your company were to disappear. Just tell us who you're talking about.
So it would be
Employees, colleagues.
customers.
Of course, Anna can spell in English, but that's something else.
Okay, no problem. It was a place that changed my life.
Okay. What's Ruth working for? Who is Ruth working for? Okay. We'll leave that with Ruth so that you have an opportunity to network. The idea and the exercise of writing your obituary is to find out your unique selling proposition. This is almost the marketing exercise. So if you've told your obituary and you had to have a long disclaimer before, do it again. We'll do it next time when we meet. But this is how you find out what you really stand for. This is how you dig for values. And this is how you dig for the message that you want or you think you want to stand out for. Now, you can, in designing your message, you can go Greek all the way, and I'm not trying to be any kinky, but you can try to use the traditional Greek model of logos, ethos, and pathos, and that is, through the message that you design, you can appeal to logics, to heart, and to people, yeah? You can do it that way. So logos, in this case, you would look at your facts, your figures, your data, your arguments, that's your logic, that's your brain, right? Your pathos would be pretty much the narrative, in a sense, but the emotion that you infuse in your narrative. And in this case, you know, you see emotion, it's also about body language, it's also about visual. And then you bring the ethos, which is very much about, the characters, who tells you the story, who's supporting your story. But you can also use other techniques. I'll go rather quickly because I want to go through the videos and the other things we've prepared. So you can go through the monomyth, which is about a hero facing challenges and then grows. You can go to the mountains, the media res. Yeah, in this case, the media res, you begin at the climax and it all sort of finds a solution at the end. So this is about surprises. You can have a false start, so you disrupt the predictable outcome. Remember the nice paradise Sunday morning? That's a good false start. Now you think how you can ruin a Sunday, and then you tell a story. Layers, you can think of nested loops, that's another model. In this case, you look how wisdom is passed on to you, how you got to a conclusion, and you use multiple themed analogies. Or you look at converging ideas, which sort of fits the theme of this year's summit. But what you can also look is at structure. So you either look at contrast between where we are and the ideal, or what the ideal was and what we've achieved, or this multiple stories that we connect to a concept. I said at the beginning, though, that the most used plot, if you want, the most used structure is the one of the hero's journey. And this is why we're speaking about hero-centered storytelling. The hero's journey you can see in every possible fairy tale, myth, and story, and big blockbuster. And it starts usually with a hero, with a character that is called to an adventure, but that refuses at the beginning to engage in that adventure, right? So you kind of need to expose this character over and over until you bring it in. And the hero's journey, the idea is that it would go through this adventure and come out of it after danger renewed. It would be new. It would rediscover something. So it's a journey of transformation. Now, of course, if you go into mythology, then you'll have supernatural aid and you'll have threshold guardians and you need to pass in a world to another. Of course, you say, how does that work to corporate comms? You reduce it. There are bits that you keep from this hero's journey, but the idea is, the message, right? That's how we started, is that the message is that of transformation. And so, we go back to that periodic table. I'm thinking, what roles can and who can play those roles? Just spilling the beans a bit. Let's have a look.
This is what I feel, and this is how I would like to express myself. I knew I was gay when I was around 14. I did let my parents know about this at first. They didn't accept it. I was confused. I was in the stage, I guess, of in denial. I started working for HSBC on the 13th of August, 2007. I had a lot of struggles, self-issues, and I had to work on my confidence, really. So it was purely at HSBC that turned everything around. When I did tell them about my preference, I felt overwhelmed because they respect how I was and how I really am.
When Maggie finally came out, everyone was supportive.
In January 2013, I made this big decision for myself, physical or sexual change. The very first people who knew about this were my friends, my colleagues.
I encourage her because I know it's difficult for her to transition. And she's like a daughter to me. And I'm happy for what she has achieved.
I started taking hormones to have this more feminine look. My mom did support me about it and sent me 4 boxes of dresses and clothes. In the outside world, I received a lot of negative comments. So I just had to overcome the criticisms I have from these people outside. HSBC provided a lot of support, moral support, and in terms of encouraging me to just express yourself and just show the real you. I feel better now, and I think that helped me build my personality and becoming more confident at work as I'm now able to express myself of who really I am.
So, HSBC now, and Pierre, I'm very happy you're here, is a internal communication initiative that I got to learn about a long time ago. But this is an initiative that has been so popular that is now on YouTube. We can discuss all about that. But it's a project that started with storytelling at its core. Now, of course, where are you? I asked this morning on Twitter what storytelling is to you, and I got this tweet from Hans saying, against all Dilbert odds, storytelling is one of the cornerstones of building corporate identity and engagement at the same time. And I like it because it speaks about the hero's journey, which is not really what we want to achieve, which is like eventually the plucky engineer finishes PowerPoint slides despite interference from a pointy-haired monster. By the way, do you know what PowerPoint stands for? It's presentations for people with power but no point. Which is why I use Prezi, by the way. Just saying. So, master plots. The one that you've seen is the hero's journey, which is about transformation. But there are many other plots. The most used into corporate communications and public relations stratcoms include these 20, from quest, adventure, pursuit, rescue, escape, revenge, rivalry. I've highlighted 4 of them, 5, because I think you would see these the most often. Rivalry, for instance, is what we used to see in America in the competition between Pepsi and Coke. And it's what we still see in America between Visa and MasterCard, which is something that from an advertiser, communicator's perspective, we don't get to see that often in Europe because competitive communication is not legal. But quest, for instance, is something that you see a lot. And the plot, the quest plot, is usually found in the About Us, into the history of companies. And so Starbucks, for instance, does this really nicely, setting up the scene. There's a paragraph in their About Us that says in 1983, Howard traveled to Italy and became captivated with Italian coffee bars. And the romance of the coffee experience. I mean, if you're not in Italy right now thinking of a sniffy espresso, I don't know where you are. And he had a vision to bring the Italian coffee house tradition to the United States. So you can see the quest, you can see the journey. The difference between the quest and the adventure is that the adventure puts your character into danger or into situations that are a lot more extraordinary. And who to speak about the venture than Elon Musk?
My computer has control of the vehicle.
Do we see anything on the sensors that's a problem?
Nothing right now. Nothing.
I'll say go for launch.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Go. All right, so what you got?
Speed 1.2 kilometers per second, downrange distance 11 kilometers.
Shortly after main engine cutoff, we're going to separate the stages and begin the second stage ignition.
Come on.
Main engine cutoff. The first stage is returning to land as the second stage powers the Orcom satellites to low Earth orbit. The fairings have successfully deployed. The first stage will soon begin its series of 3 burns to head back towards Cape Canaveral.
Okay, where's the... Okay, this is bad. Potentially bad. It's standing up. It's standing up. When we started coming in, it sounded like an explosion. Yeah, man.
Oh my God. Yeah, look at this. Look at it. It's just sitting there. Look at that.
What? Holy smokes, man. It's kind of amazing that this window of opportunity is open for life to go beyond Earth. And we just don't know how long that window is going to be open. The thing that gets me most fired up is that creating a self-sustaining civilization on Mars would be the greatest adventure ever in human history. It would be so exciting to wake up in the morning and think that that's what's happening.
So the quest in this case put Elon Musk, he was not personally in danger. It's usually the adventure that puts the character in danger. But as you see, it's an extraordinary situation, an extraordinary journey of discovery. Now, other master plots that are seen most often on activist PR are the underdog and the wretched excess. The underdog usually either presents an over-the-top personality or a reluctant hero, but they're both struggle against the tyranny of the powerful elites. Think of Greenpeace. Think of every big NGO, established NGO. They would come up with this narrative most of the time. They are the underdogs. They're the ones that are serving underserved populations. They represent unheard voices. And it's the elites, whatever the elites sound like, that they're opposing. The wretched excess goes on consumption. And I need to check time. I've included the video of the Meatrix. Are you aware of the Meatrix? Have you ever seen the video? Jonas Sachs, whose concepts, some of the concepts I've presented today, he wrote a book called Winning the Story Wars. From a marketing communications perspective, where he also speaks about hero-centered storytelling. And the Meatrix was, in a sense, well, it's really old. I mean, you can see just from the grainy video capture, came with this concept of storytelling, of capturing the attention and inciting to action in a wider concept, but moving away from the corporate message or the NGO message, here's me as an NGO, but rather personifying and move it elsewhere. I'll take the risk and I'll show you the Meatrix.
Here you go, Leo.
Psst. Leo.
Who are you? And how did you know my name?
I am Muphius, and I know a lot about you. Have you heard of the Meatrix?
The Meatrix?
Do you want to know what it is?
Okay.
The Meatrix is all around you, Leo. It is the story we tell ourselves about where meat and animal products come from. This family farm is a fantasy. Take the blue pill and stay here in the fantasy. Take the red pill and I'll show you the truth. Welcome to the real world.
What?
Okay, I'll stop there because this uses the plot and the characters that are so used from the Matrix, but puts them hilariously, extremely seriously into a social cause. And this speaks about farming, excessive farming. And in a sense, the plot of the Matrix is changed because you don't have the underdog, you look at the wretched excess. Going back to Hans, Dilbert, as a story, goes on having a static character that presents a plot where status quo is good, and the structure of how this plot is presented is through hilarity ensues. So something absurd happens, and in the end, everybody is ha-ha. So what you've seen are plots that are very used to. We've seen the message, the conflict, the plot. Now let's talk a little bit about the who, the heroes. And the heroes in stories, particularly if you work in organizations, can be in, and those are your employees, your colleagues, can be the organization. Of course, you can also have the communities if you have a collaboration between your organization and the community. And you can have your CEOs. And I said there are a couple of things, there's a word of warning that I'll come back to when we speak about the organization and the CEOs, the leadership. So let's not necessarily speak of the leadership team. What's very, very important in the time of today, as you've seen, and I'll mention Edelman again, their definition of storytelling might be rubbish, but their research into, so their trust barometer, although also very simplistic, it's rather useful. And if you're aware of the trust barometer, the idea is that peer-to-peer trust has increased over the years, which in a sense coincides with the increasing power and ubiquity of social media. This happening at the detriment of organizations, institutions, media, and NGOs. And this was referenced in this morning keynote as well. So in this context, speaking about employees, speaking about people like us, it's extremely important. And this is why HSBC now is such a powerful and successful project and continues to exist for very long, because they are looking, well, they have the advantage of a big organization, but they're looking for the stories that others would not dare to tell. And it's those stories of transformations, of challenge, of conflict, of success, where HSBC becomes the mediator, the supporter of the transformation that are important to the employees, rather than those of HSBC is doing this and that, and we're the best in the world managing your money. I don't know if you are. This is also seen, interestingly enough, in Romania. I've been recently in Romania, and I've seen that every possible retail, like Carrefour, but it's not the only one, has this concept. They're recruiting. It says the world at Carrefour. So Lumea Carrefour is the world. Carrefour is more, is about the people. And in the recruiting in Romania, this concept of it's the teams as the people as the recruitment has been quite a leitmotif, I'd say. So remember, when you tell stories, try to find the heroes with whom your audiences would connect. And so look for what your audiences would see people like us or people like them in that case. So if you are very keen, though, and extremely intent on using storytelling to portray your organization as a hero, because that's what your CEO said, then rather move the concept into what we've seen Starbucks or Elon Musk and Tesla doing, and that is look into the myths, into the history, into the fabric of what makes the organization, and into the things that define the values. Start, though, with writing the obituary first, so that know what you'll be missing if your organization will not be around. And I think this is rather pretty. It's what Polaroid is doing.
3, 2, 1, smile. Here you go.
It all began here in February 2008, when Polaroid announced they would cease production of instant film. It was the end of the world. It was the end of birds, and it was the end of rainbows. Pop and pop art, leaps of faith, and good vibes, and eyes. Patterns, light, dark and shade, and almost the end of Betsy. And the little things. It was the end of images that were real, instant, and that you can hold in the palm of your hand. An art form set to expire. But some of us couldn't let that happen, so armed with the love of instant photography, we started the impossible project, hell-bent on resurrecting the film.
I'll leave it there, because in this case what you have your history, where we come from, and then you bring in your heroes, which are from the part of the organization, right? They're in a sense the underdogs. They're fighting adversity. Yeah? We were hell-bent on not letting Polaroid go. So they come up with a new camera. And yes, it can push a product, and storytelling can help clarify a product, but it makes a lot more sense in its context of explaining the need and what it comes from. Having said that, I said at the beginning that when we speak about hero-centered storytelling and the context of trust in which we operate, I would give you one word of warning. And that is that if you want to use storytelling that is memorable and powerful, and that has impact both internally and externally, try. I don't say stop it, but rather try, of considering how your organization can be the mentor in somebody else's journey, rather than going back to the traditional marketing and what we've learned by the book approach, where the organization is the hero, the sort of brush your teeth with this toothpaste, because otherwise everyone will hate you and your mouth will stink and your life will end. Rather than buy my product because you can't exist without it, or use my organization, think how can your organization become the mentor, the guiding force to change within your field. And I have an example, though we've got 3 more minutes, so I'm sorry I'll rush you. Have you seen the campaign from Always? There have been 2 videos. All right. I'll show you a snippet of it. We'll do the watching some other time so that you know what it starts with.
Have you ever been told because you're a girl that you should not do something?
Yes. All the time. All the time. It's a constant. People think that girls are supposed to be all happy and la-di-da, you know?
Be kind of traditional, like don't do something too challenging.
I can't really, like, rescue anybody. Like, it's always, like, the boys.
Yeah, Wonder Woman shows the opposite. I hear at the box office is the same. So, what Always is doing is not selling a product anymore. Is inviting, and they had this campaign, Like a Girl, and this is the second video in the campaign. They have invited people to think about the stereotype and break it. And so this is what they say. How is it to kick like a girl? And they're asking boys, and they do la-di-da. And then they invite a girl who kicks them really bad. And I really enjoy that. So the idea is the brand becomes the mentor and the guide and someone's transformation and empowerment. And it's not about buying my product, but rather the transformation that happens. So finally, if we speak about CEOs, the same word of warning and leadership, the same word of warning as with organizations. Think of them about being mentors, but if they're really deadly keen on being presented as heroes, then think about how the things that you communicate, elaborate, explain, elucidate, help people lead. Ooh, look, they're mentors again. How do they lead others in the future? How do they share knowledge? And just as a word of wisdom, you can go for attributes of communications, for instance, so they could be sensitive or adaptive or creative, or think of attributes of trust. And in that case, they need to have competence and character and fearlessness. So, on that note, hero-centered storytelling, where do you stand on it? That's it? Yes, Ruth. Ooh, sorry. I forgot about it. It's flying to you.
I just wondered how you, who obviously is somebody who is passionate about real stories, don't you sometimes think that it's really cynical to hijack stories for gain? And sometimes it can really backfire, because anytime now that a car ad comes on, and it's not obviously a car ad, but it's some people doing some incredible adventure for about 4 minutes, and then when it's clearly a car ad, you just go, oh, gee, that's just awful. I mean, have we got to the point where it's overused sometimes, or badly used, perhaps?
That's a good point. Storytelling has existed as narrative and has been also linked to marketing efforts for a longer time than corporate comms. And we're here to hijack, in a sense, and reappropriate storytelling into the corporate world, and not only, so into the organization world. That was my aim of the story. But rather make you think about it not into pushing products and desirable things, but rather pushing stories that we can relate to. So it might be true, cynical, there's a car in there, haha, look, some people are having a good time. But my question would be, what are those people learning from that story? And if you end up being so cynical at the end of that video, then they've done something wrong. Have you ever felt that HSBC was pushing any of their services to you when you watched the video that we've seen before? And have you ever felt that Always was trying to get you convinced, even from the small portion of the video we've seen, to push a product? People didn't know. At the first campaign, people didn't know. And it went viral on social media. And a lot of people sort of said, nah, can't be an agency and an organization like that. So answering your question, I think storytelling that has meaning needs to show that transformation, needs to show that conflict and the lesson that the hero goes through, rather than, oh, by the way, and they used the car in the process. Yes, please. The microphone left.
Every form of corporate communication has its artificial sauce around it, of course. But I was wondering, in a connection with the question of my neighbor, 4-minute advertisements, Always is already here for several years. Do you also have scientific data on far longer stories that are already here for maybe 20 or 30 years in corporate comms.
I haven't looked into those.
That actually can be a good argument to start such a campaign, and because in the end you have to stick to it for a very long time.
Short answer, no. I haven't looked into that. But a longer answer is thank you. I've got my next project.
Sorry, George Clooney and the coffee, that's a good one to look at. George Clooney, where he
I know, the Nespresso or whatever it is.
But that's been running forever. So you could look into
Oh, so you mean a character that was recurrent in advertising over time? Different things. Then I didn't get it. I think Pierre has a question. I'll come back to you at the break. But no, I haven't, and I haven't seen research that is done on longer use of either, as you say, Ruth, extended characters over campaigns or older image videos and campaigns. And if you mean length and length of video, yes.
So Pierre Gaud from HSBC, thank you very much for the very kind words.
We've never met, by the way.
Yeah, we've never met. I had no idea you were going to say that. I am the father of HSBC now. We invented it in 2012. I think that the distinction I would make, and this is not a dig at marketing, but the ethos that we stuck to when we started this, it's unscripted and it's all true.
Yeah.
So we do fact, marketing does fiction. And there's nothing wrong with fiction which illustrates a universal truth, and it can be brilliant storytelling. But we made a commitment to not use and abuse our employees or hire actors to pretend to be employees. Every film we've done, and we've done hundreds by now, unscripted and real. And the best performing social media content that HSBC has ever created to date was one story, you had it up on one of the slides, Jennifer's Big Day.
Yeah.
Which hit 12 million views without any paid promotion or any of the other agency tricks that people use, because it was just a beautiful, real, true story.
I mean, just to add to that, the story is important, but storytelling is, remember, is a means to an end. So your comms need to think of what that storytelling wants to achieve. So what I know from your colleagues is that there is a very strong research framework in-house that looks at impact on the employer brand, looks at retention of staff, looks at surveys twice a year, and all this. So it's not just 12 million views, wonderful, haha, vanity metrics, makes you feel warm inside. But it's not that that's valuable, but rather the fact that you have higher staff retention, a higher number of recommendations, a more positive brand perception, which is aligned to your brand. And these are all things that you don't measure through the number of views. Thank you very much. I think we have overstayed our welcome. And thanks for coming closer.